welcome to another episode of the Spartan Spotlight podcast. It is basketball season at Michigan State. It's been a long time coming since this Elite Eight team has seen the hardwood, and this past week we've really had some action to talk about. Who more fitting to have on to kick off the Michigan State basketball season than Spartan Hoops DK himself? David, how you doing today?
Good, man. How are you, Justin? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. It's great to talk about actual basketball. I know, like, all offseason long, we've been talking about the hypotheticals and the different lineups they can throw out there and the ceiling of the team and stuff. But it's different when you actually get to see a proof of concept. And so far, it's been a great proof of concept. And big win against Arkansas yesterday. We're recording this here on Sunday night. Should be in your feeds before your Monday drives. And Michigan State with a 69-66 win over John Calipari in Arkansas. DK, I will ask you what you kind of were expecting going into that game. I will go ahead and expose myself first and say that I thought it would be a loss. I thought that would be a game where Michigan State would give it their all. They'd lose by 7 points like they do in the second game of the season often here with the Champions Classic, but that is not what happened here. What did you kind of think going into this game?
Yeah, listen, it's a little different than it's on a neutral. I feel like if this game was on a neutral, maybe they don't end up winning. But the Breslin was rocking. I was in the building. I think the home crowd was worth at least 8 to 10 points. I just think that the whole night it was raucous. And they gave them something to cheer about. I was pretty insistent that I thought the start of this game, the tone setting was extremely important. And then you just get kind of that huge impact right out of the gate from Carr. And I think it really just set the tone in terms of what Michigan State intended to do. So, I probably lean a little bit more towards the likelihood of them potentially dropping it. But you just never know. The Breslin special, that's a kind of a young team. They're two backcourt members in Thomas and Darius Acuff. We're going to see kind of a pretty hostile environment, and I think that the crowd kind of gave it to him for that. So I think that there was hope for me, but also, after the exhibition play that we saw, there was certainly a little bit of skepticism for me and like, what is the actual, comfortable floor for this team? And I think that anybody who watched that game, regardless of how poor they shot, has to feel just a little bit better about the overall potential floor for this team. I think it was exponentially raised in my mind after the performance that they had yesterday.
Definitely, yeah. I personally, going into this game, part of the big concern I had was the shooting guard play that Michigan State would get early on in the season. Kurtang, I know a lot of potential, and I know they kind of like how hard he works and like kind of the long-term projection of the whole Josh Langford arc that they've kind of talked about. But I haven't really seen it tangibly kind of proven. I didn't really see it much last year. I didn't really see it in the scrimmage this year. I didn't really see it in the first game of the year. So it really all was going to hinge on like what else they were going to get from the guards in this game. And they didn't necessarily like fill it up. Like, I know Trey Fort hit that 1-3 and ended with 5 points total, and it was Jordan Scott adding another 6 points. But to me, it's the little things. It's like they're doing stuff from the guard spot that even if you're not scoring, you got to be doing the other stuff. And predominantly Jordan Scott's who I'm talking about when I say that, because Kurtang played 5 minutes last game. Jordan Scott played 26 in his second game as a college freshman. And I think what he has provided in the blue collar categories of hustle rebounds, kind of help side defense, active hands in the passing lanes, he, to me, is the biggest kind of surprise. We'll talk about Cam Ward, but I don't think you or I could have been any possibly higher on Cam Ward coming into his Michigan State career. But what has Jordan Scott provided that kind of factors into how high this team's ceiling can be?
Yeah, I mean, Izzo said it a couple times, but I think the IQ, and I think that they just thought physically and defensively he was going to be a little bit behind the curve, and they kind of were surprised when he came in for that. I think that his length has made up for maybe some of like the kind of lack of pop. And I think that just positionally, he's just always kind of in the lanes and he has good size, right? So when you're 6'6", 6'7", he's got a plus wingspan and you're in the right position all the time. I think that can go a long way for making up for maybe, the lack of either vertical or athletic kind of pop. So I think I've been really pleasantly surprised. I thought he was going to be a guy that maybe took a couple of years to mature. Obviously, with the Glenn injury, he's getting a little bit more run kind of right off the get-go. And I think that if you're looking at maybe what Michigan State's able to lean into long-term this season, I kind of thought they were going to have to be better on the defensive side of the ball than they were going to be offensively. And he's kind of a nice connector piece to kind of help shore up some of that side of the ball. And the rebounding, right? Like we saw in the two exhibition games where he just, I would say he was not unafraid to be in the mix for that. I thought he rebounded in a game where there was a lot of athletes on the floor yesterday again. I think that if he's willing to do the little things, defend and rebound, and then when the shot eventually comes around a little bit, I think, sky's the limit. So between both the freshmen, they're going to need them this year in a big way. And I think we've seen it early, some early surprises, especially from Scott.
Definitely. And I think we all knew coming into the season that these are two really good signees, or I guess even coming into enrollment, that these were like two really good signees in this freshman class. But like you said, like the first thing that Michigan State coaches were kind of saying behind the scenes was obviously we knew Cam Ward is someone that could play in the NBA, but Jordan Scott is actually much better as a true freshman than we thought he would be. And once again, it kind of shows like this rebirth of Michigan State basketball after the couple years of downplay, that talent development is back and evaluation is back, and kids are coming in and doing the little things, the blue collar things, right? It's not kind of your point guard's not the one that's throwing the ball away and then blaming others. It's like everyone from top down is kind of leading by example, leading with tenacity, and even the freshmen coming in are doing that. And I mean, what better time to talk about Cam Ward than kind of with the tenacity angle of just a man among boys, it seems like, and yet he's one of the youngest guys out there, throwing down dunks, borderline technical foul distances, hanging on the rim, getting rebounds, sealing guys off on that inbound where he kind of got that positioning and went straight up strong. I mean, it's been a while. Like Michigan State had a guy that coming in as a true freshman is going up strong around the rim, and it's been great to see.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think that the, early season play, the two exhibitions, and then the first game against Colgate, you kind of just saw him being willing to kind of mix it up on the glass and then, doing what he needed to defensively. But he's the leading scorer in the state of Maryland for a reason. I thought at a certain point in time, we were going to be able to see a little bit more of offensive output from him. I didn't know it was going to be an explosion like this, second game into the season against, probably one of the more athletic teams that Michigan State is going to see. They see Duke, obviously, Kentucky has some athleticism too, but, top to bottom, Arkansas is an extremely athletic team, particularly in the front court. And to see the physicality, just the hands, like he was positionally in just great spots all night and then digging stuff out in traffic. And I think that this roster has just so desperately missed a guy that could go get you a bucket, like with some authority on the low block. And I think that they finally maybe found a guy. And it's funny enough that his last name's Ward, because I would argue maybe the last time they had a guy that could go get you a low post bucket, it probably was Nick Ward. Xavier Tillman operated a lot more out of the short roll. He's a guy that could go get you one around the paint, but he did it in a lot different way. He wasn't really a back to the basket. And I think that the defensive versatility is what originally has kept Cam Ward on the floor. And now you see this offensive explosion. My thought process is like, get the guy the ball on the block. He was decisive. He was athletic. He showed me a little bit more like above the rim athleticism than maybe I thought that he had, at least from the early part. And, there's going to be some ups and downs, right? He's a freshman. He's not going to be putting up 18 and 10 every night. But to see this kind of performance this early in, to get a flash of maybe what the potential ceiling is long term, I think that the staff has just got to be over the moon that he ended up in the fold and that he gave them this early, because they needed every bit of all the buckets he gave them last night to win. And I thought it was just a really, really special freshman performance in that kind of spot.
Yeah, double-double in your second college game with 18 and 10 against a team like Arkansas with that front court. I had someone on campus DM me when they saw the Arkansas team walking around the day before. They're like, man, are we like the same? Are we playing the same sport as like what this Arkansas team looks like? Just like dudes walking in that looked like they were in the NBA in terms of like physical and tangible. So I think at the end of the day, like this is such a big win. Like I don't necessarily know what Arkansas is going to be by the end of the year. Like, I don't know if they're going to be a Final Four team, but when you look across the court and you see the guys that they can play like that, they run like that, they have that size, like you can't convince me that this isn't going to be a solid Arkansas team at the very least. And to have that win in your second game and it being led by somebody who's playing a second game of the season, I just, based on that concept alone, couldn't be more excited about the long-term ceiling of this team. I personally, like, as you know, I told you, like, I thought the ceiling of this team was like maybe fourth in the Big Ten, maybe get a double bye, definitely keep the tournament streak alive, and that's probably all you can hope for. It's probably too early to be like, oh, DK, you think they can make a Final Four? Like, we've only seen 2 games. But, like, at the very least, now I think that ceiling that I laid out is, like, the expectation. Is, like, they should be in that 4th to 5th seed. And that's not like, oh, that's the best they can do. That's like, this is what they should be able to do with what we've seen so far.
Yeah, listen, I think for everything that they did well, which was defend, rebound, and finish in the paint last night, just a dominant rebounding performance after kind of some lackluster again in the exhibition. I'm glad that they've kind of flipped that switch. I thought coming into the season here, you're going to have to figure out what it looks like in the half court offensive side, right? And so you're going to need to rely on the defense. You're going to need to rely on your rebounding to kind of give you that. And that's what it was last night. There was very few shots that were made outside the paint for this team. You had a 4-3, you had a Cooper, like one-handed 15-footer. He might even had a foot in the paint. I mean, I think I could count on one hand how many shots went down outside of the paint. That's a tough recipe to win a lot of games. The way that they did it, it was gritty, it was grindy. It's maybe not the ideal way at all points in time to win it. I think that DNA is going to carry over and it's helpful, but at the same time, at a certain point in time, you're going to have to make perimeter shots to beat better teams. So I think that the real concern there is just, I didn't think that the shooting could be possibly worse heading into the season. And I think, unfortunately, it is. There's just not enough. And you kind of heard Izzo in the post game. The couple guys that maybe he likes to potentially shoot, he's waiting to maybe see them kind of be complete players and play a little bit better on the defensive end. I think you have Fort. I think Kohler is going to perform better than he showed yesterday. I just thought his shot was flat. It didn't look like he had his legs under him. He was a little bit timid in the paint. Which we've seen in some spots when he faces this kind of length and athleticism. But I just didn't think overall he had that great of a game, and he finished with 10 and 7, which I think if you're looking at like a floor for him, I think that speaks to kind of what he's developed into, where we're looking at like 10 and 7. That's not even a good game, but the eye test, it was a little bit different. He struggled in some spots. But I think in general, you're going to be able to rely on him to be able to hit you a couple threes. But you got to hit, 5, 6, 7 threes a game if you're going to be able to make a second weekend potentially go beyond that. So I think that the most concern, the largest concern is just the shooting. And they're just going to have to kind of grit and grind some of this out. And you just have to hope that at a certain point, there's a couple games along the way where they maybe find the stroke a little bit more consistently, because the recipe to win these games, defend, rebound, run. Yes, we did all those check. But the other part of it is like you're going to have to hit some shots long term. And so that's probably the largest concern with this team at this point.
Yeah, and that's all definitely true, especially to make a run in the NCAA tournament. Like, you're not going to be able to grit and grind your way through like 4 games in a row and make a Final Four. But in terms of like them having like a 20-win season or like an 18-win season and coasting into like maybe the 6th seed in the Big Ten, maybe 5 or 4, I think this floor that we're talking about, like with the grit, like with manufacturing wins like this when the threes aren't falling, that sounds a lot like what we saw from Michigan State last year, when everyone was kind of saying like, oh, they're not a good 3-point shooting team, and they're just kind of having Jace Richardson go off here and there, and they're kind of having defense and transition that's doing it. The half court, where the bucket's going to come from. And eventually, obviously, like they did end up becoming a good 3-point shooting team, and they did end up scoring every single night the way that people were originally saying was kind of fraudulent. And I don't know if they have the strength and numbers like they do last year, but like mucking up these games and just winning off of toughness and defense and a lot of transition points, I think that can get them kind of far in terms of the overall win-loss record. I don't think you can I don't think you can hang a banner that way. I don't think either of us have any delusions about that. But I think the floor that they have, I think, has me thinking that this is going to be a fun season for the most part. And I think we can kind of also transition into what we really care to see out of this season, and that's kind of pivot us into the recruiting side. If the class that was coming together wasn't coming together the way it was, or they had one or two guys and maybe you're not excited about half of them, you're kind of thinking, all right, like let's actually see something this season that kind of gives you hope and kind of gives you something to hang your hat on. But now it's kind of starting to become a title window. And everyone that's followed your content and everything you put out on Twitter and everyone that follows recruiting, they obviously know about these guys they have committed: Carlos Medlock Jr., Jasiah Jervis, Julius Avent, and then the announcement coming on Friday from five-star center Ethan Taylor. And they're also still in the mix for Maxie Adams, small forward from Sierra Canyon, who's between Michigan State and North Carolina. What they're developing here in terms of the next couple years, I think is one of Izzo's best chances at a second title. I know this is something that people have said over several different times over the last 25 years or so since he's won the last one. But obviously, there's no reason to think it's not the case until some of these guys hit the court, and maybe if they don't live up to the potential, then you can kind of discount that. But what is your take on this season being something that is more of a building towards next season thing, and anything is kind of a bonus this year? Because that's kind of where I'm leaning towards as this recruiting class is coming together.
Yeah, well, listen, the commitment of Jasiah Jervis makes you just kind of think that this season, to a certain degree, has some ability to kind of be some foundational footprint. I think that we kind of all knew coming into this season that this roster, as it's currently constructed, is probably not a national championship type roster, right? And I don't think that's unfair to those guys. I think that this is a great group of guys. I know that the staff absolutely loves this group. And I think that they're going to be fun this year. I mean, I think that yesterday, if anything, proved that this team is going to play their hearts out. It's not always going to be the prettiest basketball, but they're going to be fun because of the way that they play and how physical they are and how hard they are. And I think that what you're seeing kind of develop potentially out, you have Fears, who looks like he's taken another step, particularly offensively. You have Carr, who I think, struggled a little bit in kind of this early part. And then yesterday, I thought he was really, really good. We didn't really touch on that, but I thought, on the glass, 5 defensive rebounds, 7 total. I thought he was great slashing in any space that he had, finishing through contact. He finally hit some free throws. But he looks like a guy that probably is.
The blue collar look, the baggy shirt, you knew he was going to get access all color blue collar activities with that.
Yeah, somebody said it was his own graphic tee too, which I hope that is true, because I love that even more, that he's just rocking his own graphic tee in a double XL underneath there. The hoop aesthetic was pure there. It was like a 90s throwback. I love that. But if you're able to retain Carr again in the fold, which I just as early, we don't know yet, right? But we'll know probably in January, February what this, potential step looks like. But I think that if you're able to retain him, you have Fears, and now you're seeing these 2 freshmen start to pop a little bit. And all of a sudden, you look at kind of what you have as you're starting to put it together, and you're thinking to yourself, God, they just really need a 3-level bucket getter that can shoot the 3 at a high volume clip and create his own shot. And then Jasiah Jervis is all of a sudden now in the fold and potentially able to give you that. And Medlock is a guy that can give you a bucket coming off the bench. And then you look at potentially adding Ethan Taylor to that mix. A guy that you're thinking is going to have some of that athleticism, some of that rim running and protection. And yeah, I think it's fair to say that with some of what we've seen just even already at this point in the season, with kind of that core 4 guys that I think that you can continue to build on, and what the possible expectations are for the class finishing out for Michigan State, it feels like potentially a window is slightly opening. I personally think that they maybe still need to add another big. And then Caleb Glenn, who's 6'7", 215, 220 pounds, shot 40% from 3. It's easy, obviously, to forget as this season goes that he's going to be, kind of an integral part. And, it sucks that he's not part of this team, because I think they could desperately use some of the shooting. But he's getting a chance now to see how this program operates, to kind of get some shots up under him, to get healthy. He's going to spend a year around the program, understanding what the coaches want, what the expectations are. And so you're kind of starting to put together some pieces. And I think you need to add maybe one more center in the mix, some type of veteran, some guy that's going to be able to bang a little bit. But I think that you can really, really kind of start circling the potential for what is going to be on the roster. And I think it's a situation where the talent as a whole is going to be in that top 10 and that top, 12, 15 teams. And then if it can come together, maybe there's a 2-year window potentially with Fears' years left. You got 1 year of Carr left potentially. And then you have all these newcomers. There is a potential window that can open there if it all comes together. So I think it's extremely exciting to be able to watch the season with the hope and knowledge of kind of what's coming in on top of what you're going to see from these guys this year.
Yeah, I think everybody that pretty much has eligibility left, fitting perfectly with the class that's coming in. It's almost like a perfect puzzle piece here of like, hey, like shooting guard, like we don't really know what Michigan State's going to get out of a lot of these guys, even though Jordan Scott's been awesome. And I expect him to kind of next year be like that 6th man of the year kind of role for Michigan State, while Jervis is the starting 2 and Carr at the 3, I guess, Cam Ward at the 4. Like you're bringing these guys in that have these sort of long experience kind of track records heading into next year. And then you kind of have, as you know, Fears at the 1. And I think Medlock would be an upgrade over what Michigan State has at the backup point guard spot this year. I think the real question, like you said, is going to be that center spot outside of Ethan Taylor. It's 2 games, but we haven't really seen anything that spectacular from Jesse McCullough. So at that point, you're kind of replacing all of Kohler and Cooper's minutes out there with just a true freshman. And then whatever McCullough ends up being by the end of the year, I don't necessarily know if Michigan State is going to go out there and get a portal center. You would hope that they would at least get someone like a Zapala from last year at the very least. Obviously, everybody would hope for a little bit more. But I think that's definitely true. But that also kind of brings the question of like, who are the guys that you absolutely have to see more from during this year, during this evaluation period? Like, who are the people that it hinges on a lot? And kind of because of that fear of you not knowing if they're going to go get a center, to me, the top of that list, the guy I'm watching most closely is Jesse McCullough. And then I guess like you don't necessarily need Tang to be that guy if Jervis is coming in and Scott is as good as we think, but it sure doesn't hurt. And it'd be great to have that length and that shooting. But like those are the 2 guys that kind of to me are the ones I'm watching the closest. What is kind of your evaluation checklist while we're kind of talking about this framing of this title window and this year's roster feeding into next year's?
Yeah, listen, I think you got to just keep adding as much shooting as possible. So who emerges maybe between Divine and Tang kind of as the season goes and who ends up garnering more minutes, that probably means at a certain point that the odd man out this year is going to be relegated to a pretty thin role the next year, right? Jervis is coming in and going to be demanding and absolutely deserving of a ton of the 2 minutes. And so who's going to back up that spot and what does that look like? That's going to be pretty interesting, I think. And yeah, there's going to be like the nice thing that you look at, there's potentially a lot of depth there. There's going to be a lot of guys kind of vying for minutes on there. So what does it kind of all look like? Is it possible that they slide Carr back down in some spots to be able to get Scott on the floor because he's just a guy that they couldn't take off and they want to play him at the 3? Or does Scott insert himself in and Jervis ends up coming off the bench? Like, it'll be interesting to see kind of how that shakes out. I think that the lineup that starts, next year in November is going to look a lot different than the one that's probably going to be in January. But I think that those 2 battles between Divine and Tang and kind of how those guys shake out is something I'm watching. But I think you're right about McCullough. They're going to have to get more out of him for me to really feel 100% comfortable. And as much as, Coop has gotten banged on in spots by the fan base, I thought he was like elite in the second half. They desperately missed him after his foul trouble. He played 4 minutes and he got 2 fouls. And I thought that the entire defense and really just the way that the pick and roll is played with Fears completely changed when he came back into the game. He had all 9 points of his in the second half. And I think he's just really ended up developing into, kind of like a stereotypical like 4-year big. Like he really has now, like I said early on the season, early on in his career that maybe he could develop into a Matt Costello. And I think that we're we're getting close to having that conversation. He's just super solid on the defensive end, and you're going to miss him. Like, you're clearly going to miss him. And McCulloch has not earned much PT in any of these games, including the exhibitions. I think that is a little bit worrisome. I think he's got nice touch and kind of that short roll. I'd like to see a little bit more of that, but is he going to be able to defend the position? If he's not, that again is the one position where I'm just like, yeah, if Taylor ends up committing as we kind of expect, I think you're going to be very happy, but there's also a large trajectory and learning curve for a freshman center in this program. So, between the two of it, I think you need to maybe solidify it with another body. And I hear what you're saying. Maybe they'll do it, maybe they won't. But this year, I mean, this has got to be the thinnest, really, that the center spot, I think, has ever been in terms of true centers on the roster. So we'll see what ends up happening, but I think that the staff will definitely at least consider, depending on how McCulloch develops, of maybe adding one more body in
that. And I know, like, long-term, like, conversations that I've kind of had with people is that the expectation is that Michigan State would like to add a portal player every single season, every single offseason. I believe that if they land 4 guys, like, there's definitely a spot there, and there's definitely probably an intention to do so. I think if they were to get Maxey Adams and swing the momentum a little bit back from North Carolina, I don't know if that would still be the case. And then you kind of almost start thinking along the lines of, would you rather have a 5-star Maxey Adams at a position where you kind of have like that forward, not a log jam, but like you have some solid play there from Carr and Ward and maybe Scott playing up, like, or do you kind of just want to use that on a portal center? And I think that's kind of I don't know if it's a question you have to answer. I think you go as hard as you can at Maxey Adams, and if you don't get it, it's a blessing in disguise type of scenario of, oh, great, now they're going to use this on a center. Good thing that they didn't land Maxey Adams. You can kind of cope and spin it that way. And I think that's kind of the predicament that's underlying here. I think that if Michigan State wants to truly add a portal player every year to do everything they can to win, I don't know what other position they would add somebody at, based on everything we just said about this roster other than center. So I don't mean to make it sound like people should abandon hope. I just also always err on the side of caution when it comes to that position and this program and the portal price and kind of stuff that's there. But I think everything you're saying is spot on about like the way this roster shakes out. And if what I've heard that their plan is to always add a portal player every year to supplement the roster, I think, hey, maybe they do kind of go get someone that takes the pressure off of Ethan Taylor, and then that'd be good.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, is it going to be a starting level caliber player? The answer to that's no. I think we know that pretty well. But I think that the roster this year could have a Zappala type on the roster. I would feel more comfortable with the depth, and I think that the same thing will end up being said for next year. So, go find a 6'10", 7-footer that can bang a little bit from a lower league, or if I really had my pleasure for it, I would say you go find a guy that's a front court player from Europe somewhere. Mm-hmm. You've seen the invasion of Europe kind of over to college basketball. And there's just so many guys. Heinz Steinbeck from Washington, David Merkovich, who's playing on Illinois. There's just a ton of guys that have started coming over. A bunch of them are older, guys that are 20, 21 and still having a couple years of eligibility, have played some professional basketball already. I thought, if you're going to add a player, get somebody that maybe can play both the 4 or the 5 and somebody that's a little bit more skilled. Because, again, I think that this team can continue to use guys that can put the ball in the hole with what they have, kind of together. So we'll see. I think at the very least, it's extremely exciting. And, I'm with you. There's really no other position they would potentially add a body to. And if they miss out on Adams and they intend to go get one more portal player, I really think that the only spot that it truly makes sense, given the way that the roster's construction, would be the center spot.
For sure. And kind of putting a bow on things and kind of a little more recruiting-centric final closing thought here. I think obviously, like, there's no secret that this is a great class. There's no secret that Michigan State recruiting is as exciting as it has been in years. And it has been in recent years too. It was just a small class last year and things of that nature. But what they're doing this year is beyond special. And people have been asking me, they're like, what is kind of leading to Even in this NIL era, like Michigan State here is set to beat out Oregon and Kansas for a 5-star center. And what's leading to Michigan State holding off like Will Wade multiple times, coming back with an increased sum, and Tennessee throwing around crazy money for Jasiah Jervis. And how are they doing this? How are they pulling this off? And I think it sounds like cliche, or it sounds like making Michigan State seem like it's this special family program and all this stuff, but that is what it is. Like there's no way around it. Like it's not just something that's on a brochure over at the Berkowitz Center. Like that is how they're doing it. It is, sure, they're still being competitive with the NIL, and that's something that Tom Izzo deserves a lot of credit for, in terms of not like digging his heels in the sand and saying, I'm never going to pay a kid an obscene amount of money. Like they're putting big offers out there because that's what it's taking to get these kids. But that's not the way that it's winning. They're not beating Oregon just by matching their offer that's close to 7 figures and then just sitting there. They're putting in more time. They're sending head coaches when other teams are sending assistant coaches. They're going to see Jasiah Jervis like 6, 7, 8 times in a row, while other coaches are maybe seeing him once or twice in that span. And you can get competitive with the NIL, which again is a big development here in East Lansing, but you're winning them. The tiebreakers are the relationships, and these relationships are across the board. They're strong. They're assistant coach and head coach wide. And I mean, there's not really anything that can make up for that, I don't think. And I think that's why these kids play so hard. That's why Cam Ward's coming in and getting 10 rebounds and kind of just being a dog. And Jordan Scott comes in knowing what to expect and how he has to contribute. And I know DKU kind of agree with all that, but the way that Tom Izzo does it and the way that they pull this class together, it's not just money. It's not just relationships. It's him keeping up with the times, and at 70 years old, still also doing things his way while acclimating. So, like, closing thoughts from you on this recruiting class and the program as it is.
Yeah, obviously you just got to see that Taylor commitment come across the board. But if it just ends up finishing as a 4-man, Adams doesn't come in, I mean, home run class. I mean, I don't think you could have really asked for much more. You kind of added everything that you potentially needed to on this. So I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. It's nice to see, us competitive with the money. I don't think a couple of years ago that was maybe necessarily the thing. And the times are changing, and you've seen so many of these old school coaches kind of bow out. And Izzo kind of has just stubbornly, said, I'm not ready to go yet. And I don't even know if the game really, could suffer him leaving at this point, because he's one of the few stalwarts that continues to speak his mind about the way that this is headed, and, the way in which he wants to preserve, his version of what college basketball is. And I think there's something special to be said about that. So, to continue to watch him adapt, to take a guy that's been at 6 schools in 6 years, and whether it works out or not, you just continue to see him and his willingness to be able to grow and adapt with the times. I think it speaks volumes. So listen, this class, he had to work his tail off to be able to get it. Tipton said he treated Jasiah Jervis like he was the #1 recruit in the whole country. And that's exactly what he did. He chased him all over. He made sure he understood, like, your family, this is the love, this is all real. And I think that is what makes this program so special, that you're going to be coached hard, but you're going to be loved hard. And, a guy that is continuing to willing to grind at his age and after how many years he's done it. We're just really lucky to be able to have this kind of guy. And it's ridiculous. We're always having this conversation like another 3 to 5 years, and then the timeline just keeps kind of dipping. And at this point, I think just honestly, he's going to do it until he physically cannot do it anymore. Yeah. And if he's going to recruit like this, and he's going to be able to get what he got out of those kids yesterday, I hope he does it as long as he humanly possibly can. So
yeah, I think it's funny how every year we talk about how he's putting in so much effort on the recruiting trail, and that like keeps going up and more visits to the East Coast. And like, not only is there no slowing down, it almost seems like he works even harder every passing year. And he kind of has to, and all these other factors are coming into college basketball and seeping in. And he's so stubborn is like a negative connotation, like driven, or like he has such a chip on his shoulder to prove to people he can still do things his way. And that's exactly why I don't think he'll ever just retire because he's like, oh, it seems like it's time. I think it really would be like he's like, I physically can't stay out for this many hours a day anymore, or God forbid any illness or something. But like, I really do think that's the way that this is going to play out. Is he's not going to be like, oh, 5 more years and then I'm hanging it up. I don't think he can do anything other than this. I think this is what he's going to do until he can't anymore. And then it's great. We're fortunate.
For the sickos, it's like a disease, you know.
Yeah.
He loves it so much, but it's also just like a disease. He can't quit it. So I'm just thankful that he's kind of resurged after the dip that they took and found, the passion and the love again. And, like you said, to be so driven at the age and with all the accomplishments that he's had. I just want him to get one more, right? I just really would like him to raise one more because I think, he's one of the good guys in this game and one of the ones that's been able to just, again, kind of hold it together and do things the way that he believes is the right way to do it over and over and over again in the face of like everything that's changing. So it would just be nice for the old guard to see him get one more. I would really like that before the end of the career, but this recruiting class can certainly help. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, we're very fortunate that this is the coach that we get to cover, that this is the program that we get to cover, and all the fans are fortunate that you're there to bring insight along the way. So appreciate you, DK. Your post-game yell videos are kind of like the most exciting part about these victories, and hopefully many more this year. Appreciate you taking the time, DK.
Yeah, thanks so much, Justin. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. And everyone stay tuned to the coverage that DK will also have on his Twitter every time kind of these guys commit in the coming, I guess Ethan Taylor would commit in the coming weeks. And obviously all the post-game coverage as well. So appreciate everybody taking the time, and it'll be a fun season from the looks of it. So we'll have coverage all season long. Thanks, everyone.